Well, it really has been a fun day so far to have the Walkers here with us, and thank you for the update, and that just brought back great remembrances. We have been connected to their family since you left 39 years ago, and you were here before that, obviously for 4 decades or longer, and it's a thrill to have Tina as one of the missionaries that we support in her work around the world. She's making changes. She's going to share that with you. We are not abandoning her, so don't feel frightened by that. We're going to be meeting with her after lunch a little bit just to see how we can continue to support and work with her and see that what she has started and done continues on. When she was sharing from Proverbs 5 this morning, I forgot, I should have given you a disclaimer that in order to be a part of that discussion, you had to be 38 and accompanied with your great-grandmother. So, but since none of you probably qualified for that, it's okay that you sat in on that. You're allowed to smile. Thanks, Rob. We are just thrilled that Tina's here. She's been a great servant of the Lord and a great friend of ours in the church, and I always enjoy seeing her. Some of you know that the last time I was out there at Winona, I ran into her at Ritter's Ice Cream Place, which is a great place to run into people anytime, and especially Tina. And when Dr. Walker mentioned that David was a little bit ornery, I remember when I was in seminary one season, I helped coach a little bit of the Lakeland soccer team, and David was on it. And yes, he was a little bit ornery. So, so I will confirm that testimony. Tina, thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning again. It is good to be here. I'm especially thrilled to have my parents here with me on this visit. As Dad said, I was very young when we left Rittman the last time, but I still feel a connection here when I come, and lots of familiar faces and familiar sights, so it's fun to be back. I can tell you that I, for one of the 5 children, I'm very thankful for my parents' decision to go to Africa so many years ago. I'm sure it seemed very sort of radical in those days to uproot a family of 7 and haul them off to the dark continent, but you know, God really used them there, and they fell in love with the people and the people with them, and God really used them in the medical ministry for a number of years to meet not only physical needs but also spiritual needs of the people there. So I kind of blame them for my wandering feet. Well, I shared in the Sunday school hour a little bit, focused a bit on one aspect of the ministry that I've been involved in. So I'm going to take a step back now in the worship hour and give you a broader picture. See if it works. It's always excited when it works because sometimes it doesn't. The story, it's kind of an interesting story, how our HIV/AIDS ministry, that's what I've been involved in. I've been involved in helping to build the Grace Brethren HIV/AIDS prevention ministry in the Central African Republic. So I'm going to tell you this morning the story of how all that happened. It all sort of began in 2003 when a group of missionaries and Central Africans began to brainstorm and pray about what we could do to respond to the problem of AIDS in the Central African Republic. And we would pray for 3 years actually before we were able to go and actually start the ministry. And looking back now at the success that we've seen and the response that we received, I'm convinced that those 3 years of prayer were significant to what we're seeing today, the response that we're seeing today, because we prayed that God would prepare the soil. We prayed for the Africans that God would bring to work alongside of us. We prayed for the youth that we would be reaching, and the adults too. And it's neat to see what we have today, looking back. Well, to know as much as possible about the soil, before we went in, we actually did a little study about what the country looked like. And as you can see, there are almost 2 million, just in 2000 alone. I updated the statistics, obviously, in 2003. These aren't the statistics we had, but I updated them for this presentation. But almost 2 million new HIV infections in sub-Saharan Africa in 2007. 1.6 million people died of AIDS-related illnesses in 2007 in sub-Saharan Africa. By the end of 2007, there were 22 million people living with HIV and more than 11 million children orphaned by AIDS. So this is a huge, huge, monumental problem and issue in sub-Saharan Africa. Of the 1. So just to give you even a little more idea of the gravity of this, of the 2007 AIDS deaths, it says 1.6 million people died. That's 133,000 people dying every month, 4,444 people dying every day, 185 people dying every hour, 3 people dying every minute in sub-Saharan Africa of AIDS. Every 3 minutes, someone dies of an AIDS-related illness in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know about you, but I can't even get my mind around that. That's every 9 seconds, one person dying. So these are some of the statistics we were looking at. We also began to look at some of the barriers that we would face. We talked about the statistics just now, also the fact that the poverty, the fact that most people live on less than $2 a day. The life expectancy today in Central Africa is only 40 years old. They say that if you took AIDS out of the picture, it would be around between 60 and 65 would be the life expectancy. HIV prevalence rate, 11%. Number of people living with HIV today in the Central African Republic is estimated to be about 250,000. 24,000 deaths, 140,000 orphans. So these are some of the barriers. One of the things that my ministry partner Ginger and Huck and I did when we first arrived was, in addition to some of the statistics and other issues related to AIDS in Africa, there's also just a huge fear about the disease. They don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to go get tested to see if they have it. Even if they go get tested, they're afraid to get the results. No one ever dies of AIDS, which is true. No one dies of AIDS. They die of a disease they got because because our immune system was weakened due to the HIV virus. But they won't ever say that someone died of an AIDS-related disease. They won't. They just won't. So there's a lot of stigma related to it. So one of our goals as we went in and wanted to address the problem of AIDS is we wanted to encourage people to go and get tested and know their status, to help them, if they're positive, to make some plans for their family. And there are many things that you can do to stay as healthy as possible for as long as possible, even outside of the antiretroviral drugs that many people take. But even if you can't afford those, just eating healthier, a healthier diet and avoiding reinfection, things like that, there are things that you can do. And if you're negative, then you can learn how to stay negative. And so my partner and I went to one of the testing centers to get tested early on in this last term. I, for one, just kind of wanted to see what the testing centers were like. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that they were very clean, very well organized. They had good, well-trained counselors there. And I was, yes, a little bit nervous going in, but I watched the guy take the needle out of the package, so I knew it was a new one, and He seemed to know what he was doing. I was just impressed with the whole thing, and it's all free. It's funded by the World Bank. So there are 3 free testing centers in Bangui, the capital city. So this way we could, as we're encouraging other people to get tested, we could tell them of our own experience and be able to be supportive of the centers that are available and tell them where they're at. You know, sometimes going in at the beginning in 2006, I shared a little bit about this in Sunday school, but I just felt overwhelmed by this giant, these numbers that I just couldn't even conceive. I mean, 1 in 5 is HIV positive, and in Bangui, and that's just incredible. And where does one begin? There's so many ways that you could get involved in helping. I mean, there's all these orphans. There are lots and lots of sick people that you could help with medical care. We discovered that more and more of the non-governmental organizations coming in are doing a good job of basic AIDS education, but they come in with what they call an ABC approach to AIDS prevention: abstinence, be faithful, and use a condom. But you know what? It's usually little a, little b, big C approach. No one's really coming in with an abstinence message, which really comes right out of God's Word. And another interesting point is, you know, what region of the world have more condoms been thrown in? Sub-Saharan Africa. And where does the AIDS crisis continue, where do the AIDS numbers continue to rise? Sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not working. So we also, so there's the education part is happening in terms of letting people know the truth about AIDS, but no abstinence message. And one of the most important elements to fighting AIDS prevention, AIDS is the prevention of new infections. And so that's really what we wanted to zero in on. After I did a 6-month internship, HIV/AIDS internship in Kenya in 2003. And that's where actually I was introduced to 2 campaigns: the True Love Waits campaign, which teaches abstinence before marriage, and True Love Stays, which promotes faithfulness in marriage. That's where I was introduced to these programs. But while I was there doing that internship, I really saw how God was using His Word as it went out through these campaigns to really capture hearts and change lives. And that country actually, in terms of HIV, is now seeing a decrease in HIV prevalence. True Love Waits actually was introduced to Uganda when that country had an HIV prevalence rate of 30%. That was back in the early 90s. And today, that country has an HIV prevalence rate between 5 and 10%. They were the first country in the world to see a decrease in HIV prevalence. Interestingly enough, the Southern Baptist couple that invited me to this internship in Kenya had lived in Uganda for 15 years. They'd been part of the True Love Waits campaign there. They knew the president of the country and his wife. In fact, this missionary and the president's wife were prayer partners. So the leaders of the country actually got behind the program and really promoted it. And that country is seeing the benefits today, as is Kenya. Well, anyway, I had this image in my mind, and I had seen what God did through this in Kenya and heard about what He had done through True Love Waits, in particular in Uganda, and I thought we really need that here. Grace Brethren have a great orphan care ministry going on, so we're addressing this problem of orphans, but we really need to address the heart issue, the root issues of the cause, and stop the cycle. That was really our desire going in. More than 85% of HIV infections in CAR happen through heterosexual sex with multiple partners. It comes down really to being a lifestyle issue, lifestyle choices based on knowledge and conviction. And teaching biblical purity addresses the very root problem of the AIDS crisis. So that sort of was the backdrop of my arrival in CAR in 2006, knowing these statistics, sort of having the experience of my internship in Kenya. Okay, we have the statistics, we know some of the barriers we're up against, we know the message that we want to bring in, but how do we actually plant those? What are exactly the seed truths of the message that we want to bring in? And we talked about this as the brainstorming group of Africans and missionaries, and this is sort of what we came up with. The message, the seed truths of the message that we want to bring is that you are precious to God and you're valuable to Him, and He loves you, and you really, honestly, you belong to Him, and you don't have the right to treat your body any way that you want. The fact that abstinence and faithfulness are not only what God calls us to live, but they're possible. There's a strong belief in Central Africa that abstinence is impossible. That if you practice abstinence as a youth, that when you get married you won't be able to have children. Or I shared in the earlier hour, there's this rumor that if you're a man and you're HIV positive and you sleep with 5 virgins, you'll be cured. And you can see how that would just promote and contribute to the rapid spread of HIV. So these people really need God's truth. I mean, interesting that the secular organizations would come up with the ABC approach. Do they realize that A and B come straight from God's Word? Isn't that interesting? If people practiced God's way, God's plan for sex and marriage, AIDS in Africa would go away. And I won't even go into how that would impact the rest of the world, including the U.S. But in Africa, it's not just a behavior issue, it's a life-death issue. It's not just a spiritual issue, but a life-death issue. These are some of the seed truths we came up with. So having identified these seed truths, how can we most effectively plant them in the African soil so that the plant that comes up looks African and not like an American transplant? Well, believing this, that what needs to grow needs to look African, we decided to invite our Kenyan brothers, with whom I worked in 2003, the guys that trained me, to come and help us plant the first seeds of True Love Waits and True Love Stays in Central Africa. There were 3 men that came. 2 of them are pastors. And I'll tell you, this was really, really significant to have these guys come, because no, they didn't speak French and they don't speak Sango, which are the 2 main languages of the CAR, but they were African brothers. And that was really, really important as they were bringing in a very counterculture sort of message. And their pastors, 2 of them being pastors, meant that they were held in very high respect as well. And they have people that are HIV positive in their families. They have HIV positive people in their congregation, so they could share a lot from their own experience of addressing AIDS as a believer and as a church. And so that was significant. The 3rd guy that came is the True Love Waits National Coordinator in Kenya. And he's the one that actually trained me in True Love Waits. We traveled all over Kenya, and sharing God's plan for sex and marriage. And he is a single guy, and they actually interviewed him on one of the radio stations in Bangui while he was there, which was really cool because he said, "I know what you guys are thinking. I know the rumors, and I'm here to tell you that I'm a virgin and I'm waiting till I get married to have sex. And you know what? I'm not sick at all. I've never been sick a day in my life, you know, and I'm waiting for that girl that's waiting for me, you know." And that was really powerful for them to hear that from a fellow African brother. So God is using him greatly in Kenya, but just the 3 weeks that they were with us in CAR made a significant impact on those they taught. We invited actually 75 people, Central Africans, church leaders, and youth, to come to this 3-week training by these Kenyan men. And they were introduced to True Love Waits. They were introduced to True Love Stays. They did a in-depth HIV/AIDS educational seminar with them. They talked about what God has to say about marriage, what is a family. They talked about problems within the family, what is biblical love. Just a lot of really, really good topics. And together, we were able to send out, after that training, these 75 people to go and begin a movement of biblical purity through True Love Waits and True Love Stays. So the seeds were planted there in that initial training, and then those 75 went out and began planting more seeds. And they were able to go into all kinds of places, into villages and schools and neighborhoods and churches, concert halls, sports centers, on the radio. We really have a lot of open doors there, which has been awesome. It was out of that 3-week training that sprouts began to grow. So there was a sowing of the seed to the 75, and then through the 75, more sowing of seeds. So the sprouts that we started coming up, one of them was our Grace Brethren HIV/AIDS ministry. And that ministry is called CAFA, the Christian Alliance for the Fight Against AIDS. Our ministry focus, our main goal is to educate, equip, and mobilize the Central African Church to respond in a biblical way to the problem of AIDS in Africa. You may have heard that the Grace Brethren Church in Central Africa is huge. God could just use them in such a powerful way to address the problem of AIDS, because they're everywhere in the country. Actually, they're mainly focused in the west, but we're moving now into the east. So we have huge opportunity to address the problem of AIDS. So that's our main focus, is to equip the church, mobilize them with the truth to end the cycle of AIDS. I'll introduce you to I guess I'll do that later. I'll introduce you to the team a little bit later. A second sprout that came up were True Love Waits clubs. Through the True Love Waits campaign, a True Love Waits presentation is taught. It's a 2-hour, very interactive presentation that I talked a little more in detail through the Sunday school hour. But at the end of that presentation, the youth that attend are given the opportunity to make a commitment to sexual purity, to save sex for marriage, a commitment to God. And the kids that make that decision, then we help them form clubs, True Love Waits clubs. And these clubs are really the key to the success of this campaign. This is where anyone can go to an emotionally charged 2-hour presentations. It's very interesting, and make a commitment, sign a card, but keeping that commitment is the hard part, right? And that's where the clubs come in. If we just did presentations all over every place and had kids make commitments and there was no follow-up, I mean, it'd be real hard for any of those kids to keep their commitments. But the clubs, in the setting of the clubs, they continue to learn about the commitment that they made. They continue to learn about what really is sexual purity, and what does that really mean? What does that look like in my daily life? And what is true love? And what does God say about sex and marriage in the Bible? And just talking about real practical daily things. We have discussions in the clubs about how how you dress impacts your thought life. For the girls, how it impacts the thought life of the guys, and things like that. And it's a setting where they can ask the questions that they have that they wouldn't feel comfortable maybe asking anywhere else. So in the context of the club, they are discipled, and they grow in their understanding of what it means that their body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and what holiness means. We study Bible characters like Timothy, a young man in the Bible that God used in great ways, just things like that. And then we bring together the leaders from the clubs every week for some really in-depth training in godly leadership and discipleship. So that's what the clubs are all about. We also began doing marriage enrichment seminars for couples, talking about what marriage looks like, how does it compare with what God says about marriage, and the love between a husband and wife. And often in the discussions that they have, they express a sense of relief at finally being able to talk about some of these issues that they're not used to really talking about openly. True Love Stays we haven't seen it grow like we have True Love Waits. For multiple reasons, I think. Youth are just more available in general. And we have the club idea, and clubs don't really work with, adults. But also there's this cultural tradition that men and women don't typically meet together. There's lots of men's groups and there's lots of women's groups, but for a husband and wife to come to like a Bible study or a small group or whatever is just a very foreign idea. And we kind of, there are things that you say, okay, is that an important thing to try to change? Or is that better left alone and it's not really a big deal? But and that's where we really depended a lot on our African coworkers, but they really felt like together with us that it's important that the husband and wives come together for these types of things, that it not be just a marriage seminar for wives or a marriage seminar for husbands, but that they come as a couple. So we've really kind of made that a must. And it's been working out, but it's slowly. It's slow. This slide actually shows participants of one of the marriage seminars confessing areas of weakness in their own marriage, and they built a fire in the center of the circle, and each person comes forward and burns lists that they made of past shortcomings as to symbolize trusting Christ with these things. So those are three sprouts that came up through the planting of seeds. Our Christian Alliance for the Fight Against AIDS, our Grace Brethren HIV/AIDS ministry, our True Love Waits clubs, and the marriage enrichment seminars. Which again, marriage enrichment seminars, that's a whole new sort of concept for them too. Here we have all kinds of weekends and different things for married couples, but they really don't have anything like that in CAR. And it's an important part of building the family. We've seen a breakdown in the family here in the States, and they've seen it in similar ways in Central Africa. So yes, we want to focus on the young people, but we want to focus on the parents and adults as well. Well, sprouting is great, but we need roots, don't we? A plant needs roots that go deeper. And though we started out 2 missionaries actually coming over to Africa with this concept, but honestly, from day one, the whole idea with missionaries typically is you go and God gives you this burden to serve Him in a certain way, and you're involved in this ministry, and the goal is always to turn it over to the nationals, right? But it's always a tricky thing to know the timing on that. You know, how do you do that, first of all? What's the time frame look like? And I didn't know. I knew that was typically what we want to do, and it's the goal to have it look like the country, to have it not be an American transplant, to have national leaders. But I didn't really know how to make it happen, and it was kind of neat because I didn't know that. I didn't have any. I didn't have an outline of how it's supposed to go. So because I didn't know how to do a lot of what I was doing, I was forced to depend on the Africans that God brought to the surface. And because of that, how the ministry grew, it wasn't necessarily always the missionary leading. We were sort of together in this from the start. So when it came time to sort of transfer to the nationals, it was really already done. It kind of grew up that way. I started out with the title of director, but honestly, it was a together sort of thing. On the slide here is the current director for CAFA, Dr. Francois Gumape, and his wife, Marie-Claire. He came on board with us in February of this year. And we worked together February through April, and then I sort of eased into more of a support role, which the role I've been in since April. And Francois is a wonderful. I couldn't think of anybody I'd rather have in this place, in this position. He's a man, very godly man, man that's well known not only in the fellowship in Central Africa, but in the country too. He also speaks English. He graduated from Grace Seminary several years ago. Because he speaks English, it'll be easier for him to communicate directly with partners in the States, and be able to come here every 2 or 3 years like I do, and give reports to donors and partners and prayer partners. And he also visited Kenya, visited the organization where I interned, which was the model for CAFA. So he had that image in his mind as well. He's been working with youth for years doing basketball camps, so he has a big heart for young people, and has also been the director at our Bible school and seminary for a number of years, so he's had experience working with couples. So he's a great man for the job. The downside is he's a very gifted man, and everybody wants him, you know, and so he's very, very busy and involved in many, many things. But we really only need him part-time. He's a visionary, which can be hard to find in Central Africa. Central Africans are so poor, they don't have the luxury often of thinking ahead. They're thinking about what they're going to feed their family today. So to find somebody that is a visionary is difficult, but that's Francois. And we've asked him actually to come on board with us just part-time, because the guys under him are really doing all the legwork and really leading in many ways. So he just sort of oversees, and also if we're needing to be represented at a big function, he can go, and everybody knows him, and he has a good testimony, and it's really, really important, especially in that culture. This is Paul and Denise DeBona and Tim and Ginger Hawk. Tim and Ginger are Grace Brethren missionaries. Ginger has been a part of CAFA from the beginning, and she and Paul DeBona have been working mainly on our True Love, developing our True Love Stays campaign. Paul is actually a missionary trained surgeon, and he does a lot of our AIDS educational seminars. But he also, again, as I said, works with Ginger on on the True Love Waits campaign. I show these pictures mainly to show you that from the beginning, as I said, it's been missionary and national working together. And little by little, us moving to the background, them more to the foreground. So Francois is now the director, and I've moved back into sort of, I'm sort of a PR person now, an advocate for the ministry in many ways, and I'll talk more about that. Paul and Ginger have been working together. Paul's mainly leading. He's now our True Love Waits national coordinator, and Ginger has moved into a support role as well. She's kind of doing the financial side. She's the treasurer for CAFA. Gabin Marida is our True Love Waits national coordinator, and that's him with his wife and his new little baby, Israel. And Laura Engel is a short-termer that's been out with us this year. She hopes to go back full-time, so she's gotten real involved in True Love Waits and has been assisting Gabin. But just to show you, it's been real neat how God has, how it wasn't just a missionary coming in with the idea, but it was really a national and missionary idea together. And so because of that, because I really was forced to depend in a good way on my Central African colleagues. That really, I think, I shared in Sunday school that a whole theme for this last 2 years has been 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10, God's strength being made perfect in my weakness. And I see it in so many ways, and that's one of them, where God used my weakness of, I really don't know what I'm doing, Lord, here. I've never started a ministry. I'm all the but God's. And God used that, and because he forced me to depend on him and on my Central African colleagues. So it made the transition to national leadership a lot smoother. So that's just to demonstrate one of the roots. Going deeper is the fact that we had national leadership that developed, and when you have nationals who catch the fire and catch the vision and lead it and are captured by it and excited about it, then that makes the plant very strong and the roots to grow deeper. I mentioned our True Love Waits club leaders. That was also a way that the roots went deeper, because these leaders of the clubs, which by the way are voted in by the clubs themselves, they are in in-depth training and discipleship every week. And they're really taking ownership of the campaign. They come up with all kinds of ideas. Some of you that have lived in Africa or visited know that parades are a really big deal. I think a parade went by my window every single Saturday for sure, and sometimes Sundays too, but big deal. So they're wanting to do True Love Waits parade. I remember Gabin, our True Love Waits coordinator, coming into me one day. I met with him every day to talk about different things, but he came in one time and he said, Mademoiselle, Miss, our clubs really need to have banners. I'm like, banners? I could think of lots of other things they need to have before they need to have banners, but that's one of those situations where the American coming in with my American perspective. I spent a lot of years, yes, in Africa growing up, but I'm not African. And they know their culture, they know their people, they know what works. And I'm like, well, he said, yeah, because they really need these banners, because when they meet, having a banner outside of wherever they're meeting really makes it authentic, and people know, oh, this is something real that's happening. And like, well, it was like $10 for a banner, and so we ended up contributing to that. But it was just a situation where, again, having to depend on Africans to tell me what works and what doesn't. I mean, if it were me making all those decisions, there wouldn't be a banner, and maybe that would be really significant, and the clubs wouldn't grow or whatever. I don't know, just things that we don't understand, but they know their people. So True Love Waits clubs are really growing, and kids are taking ownership. Like I said, they're writing songs with True Love Waits themes. They're out there doing concerts. They're doing the presentation themselves now. Sometimes we're running out of time here, so I don't want to take any more. But this is sometimes a video that I show of a live presentation, very interactive, as I said, and this is, on this particular presentation, it's a True Love Waits club actually doing the presentation, which is exciting. Well, today we're seeing the fruit. We're seeing changed lives. Someone I mentioned in Sunday school, I get asked a lot the question, well, you have these kids that make these commitments. Well, how do you know that they're keeping their commitments? And I don't know. I don't know. But what I do see are changed lives. I see a new hope in their eyes, and I see them excited about this bold decision that they've made, and I hear them telling their friends and excited about this, and it's something they can be proud of, that they're walking in obedience to the Lord in this area, and they're experiencing the blessings that come with that, including protection from HIV. That's some of the fruit we're seeing. 2007, over 7,000 young people in Central Africa heard the True Love Waits message, and more than 4,500 made commitments to sexual purity. Today in CAR, there's more than 50 True Love Waits clubs going on. They get together once a month for some big activity. It might be a spiritual retreat, it might be a parade, it might be a soccer competition, just something so that they know they're not alone. There's other kids out there that have made this decision, and sometimes they get together for concerts too. These are some kids from our True Love Waits clubs, just to give you some examples of some testimonies. Benedict, I don't know if you can read that. She says, I knew sex before marriage was bad, but after attending the True Love Waits meetings, I realized I need to guard not only my body, but also my mind from sexual thoughts. And here is Eric. He's a university student from Chad. God led me to a group called True Love Waits, which transformed my spiritual life and behavior by the teaching of sexual abstinence for youth. I made a commitment as of this day to save sex for marriage. And I had many that I could have put up there. But just God is at work and changing the lives of young people, and we're seeing it. And my prayer is that, 15 years down the road, that we'll see some of the, not only a decrease in HIV prevalence, but a revival in that country. Because this isn't just about AIDS. Yes, it's about AIDS, but it's about holiness and living in obedience to the Lord. And so that's what I love about the program, is that it's addressing the spiritual and the physical issue. This is our CAFA team today. And I hope you'll praise God with me for this harvest. I mean, it's His and His alone. And it's He who used your prayers and the prayers of many people to prepare the soil for His truth. And it was He that allowed the seed truths to take roots in the hearts of the African men and women. It's He who brought this team together, this team of Africans and Grace Brethren missionaries. And it's He who is changing the hearts of youth and couples as they hear of His love and good plan for their lives. So the ministry is there, it's doing well, it has roots, it's bearing fruit, so the job's done, right? The work's over. No. If a plant's going to survive, it needs nourishment, doesn't it? It needs rain. One of the main things I'm working on here in the States right now is to raise awareness about CAFA and to seek ways to sustain the ministry through prayer and financing. There's a common assumption that when the missionary is away from the field, that the ministry is weaker, but honestly, my being here is actually strengthening my African coworkers. They can grow more into their roles without the tendency to continue to look to me. I'm seeking to build a regiment of prayer warriors, and I mean real warriors, people who are committed and loyal and courageous enough to engage in combat one of the giants of our day. AIDS didn't come on the scene quickly, and it's not going to go away quickly. Only God's power and only His truth and light can uproot the generations of lies and rumors and superstitions deeply implanted into the African soil by the father of lies. And it's no secret that God works through prayer. It's how He has chosen to operate, and it's what brings Him glory as we acknowledge His sovereignty and admit our dependence on Him. And it's what best accomplishes His purpose on this earth. God also uses money to accomplish His purposes. Many of you are involved in businesses of various sorts, and every business has operating costs, right? And a Christian ministry is no different. CAFA needs funding for teaching materials. It costs money to travel around the country. It costs money to pay our national leaders like Gabin and Paul and Francois. You know, if we ask them to volunteer that time, that means a day out of the garden. And a day out of the garden means they don't eat. So it's important that we try to supplement them to help them with the work that they're doing. The body of Christ in Central Africa struggles to know what they're going to eat today, as I said, and they live in one of the poorest countries in the world, so you can understand why they must look elsewhere for financial help. The first year and a half of CAFA's ministry was funded mainly through some large donors in the Grace Brethren Fellowship, and we're very thankful for these individuals. But their business cash flows are uncertain, and they've asked us to work at diversifying our funding. So we're operating on a budget this year of about $30,000, and we have enough, praise God, to get us through 2008. But I'm looking at how we're going to get funding for 2009 and beyond.